Today I'm going to give a presentation about the color governance system, just an introduction to kind of explain how it works, how it's different from other blockchains, and the design choices we've made and why we've made them. So, jumping right in, our first things first, we wanted to make it a people-first governance system. That was idea number one. How do we take it out of the hands of the people who have a lot of coins, the people who got there first, and make it so the system is inclusive. So yeah, it doesn't need to be simple, but it needs to represent all of its stakeholders, and that means all of its users, would-be users, etc. So moving on, so how does that happen? So we have to design mechanisms with all stakeholders in mind. So what does that mean? So our major design choices were we needed a treasury to have part of the block reward funds be used that the community could decide on where that money went, whether it be for marketing projects, whether it be for other design efforts or other development efforts, etc. Pixels, which if you've read our white paper or been following us for a while, you know about now, which consist of really the core element that gets our ecosystem moving, that keeps people engaged, etc., etc. And we'll be having a future presentation on that as well. And the Color Council, Block Builder rewards and penalties, all of these we'll explain, but it just has to do with other parts of the ecosystem and where the rewards are being sent to. So, first things first, treasury. So existing users get to vote on how a portion of the block reward is spent, so that 20% of the block reward will be dictated by the community. So they will get a certain amount of votes to use every 4 weeks or so on proposals that members of the community can put forward to dictate, to move those funds around and use them for useful projects, things like that. So this is an example of what treasury proposals would look like. So if you've seen Masternode coins before or have seen anything like this, this is very similar. So for example, 100,000 color every month will be designated to the treasury at first. And this is how an example breakdown. So core funding, let's say that takes up half, and a lot of people agree with that. And then the next one takes up 40,000, and a lot of people agree with that. But next we have this, and remember how I said there's only 100,000 coins, the Japanese exchange listing. A lot of people want that to happen, however, there's not enough coins left in the treasury for that to pass. So what will happen is that'll get kicked over to next month's proposal listing, and that may or may not get funded depending on how the votes go next month. But moving on, we do have some other things that we can pass here that don't require quite as much color. Brazil coins, just some fictitious Brazilian exchange I made up. That had 15% passing ratio and then 12% passing ratio. Now, the vote differential over there is essentially the amount of people that voted yes versus the amount of people that voted no or abstained. It's that difference. So it's not just 34% of the people said yes, it's 34% more of the people said yes than saying no. So the Color Council, who are they? The Color Council are those community members that get to vote on the treasury funds. So those will be existing community members that'll have some requirements on what they will need to do in order to vote. Some of the proposed requirements are minimum amount of funds, minimum amount of activity on the platform, and so forth. And they will be rewarded with part of the block reward as well. So, Color Council, so users who have over 50,000 color and color council members will get additional votes the more coins they have. And also, didn't make it on the slide, but they will also have to meet that participation requirement and amongst other things to be eligible for that reward and to get those votes. moving on, so remember how I said that they'll get additional votes and additional funds? Well, how are those votes used? Is it just we get more votes, so if I have 10 times the amount of money, I can make 10 times the amount of I have 10 times the amount of decision power? That was one of the things we wanted to combat. So if you look at systems like Dash, you have people that just what they do is they separate all their master nodes and continually separate them, and what that allows them to do is get a ton of free votes. But we want to stop that via KYC, but also via this quadratic voting formula. So one of the things that we want to do is allow people to vote on proposals more than once. So if there's a proposal that they think is really good, they will be able to vote accordingly. However, we don't want to just give them a one-to-one, I have this much money, so I get 10 times the amount of voting power. We want to make it this quadratic formula. So 1 extra vote costs 1 voice credit, 2 extra votes costs 4, 3 extra votes costs 9, 4 extra votes costs 16 of those votes. So, and that is if you vote on the same proposal. Now if you spread them around a bit, you can double up on everything for just 1 extra voice credit, or put the real important stuff up there as well. So this is just an example of what that would look like. So if this was your dashboard of how you were voting, let's say these are the things that you say are really important to you. Let's say you're a color user, you live in Japan, and you really don't like the current exchange that color is listed on, so you're really hoping it can get listed on this other exchange here, so you put most of your voting towards that. So as you see, the 2 extra votes cost 4, these 2 extra votes cost 4, but 4 extra votes cost 16 voice credit, and this particular user has 40 voice credits, 7 remaining. This is just an example. Differential voting, I explained it a little bit earlier, but essentially it is that differential between the number of positives and the number of negatives. So on the Color platform, you'll have 3 options when voting on a proposal. You can either not vote on it at all, you can vote it down, or you can vote it up. Now, most people probably won't bother voting things down unless they think it's a really, really bad idea or it's a really contentious one. They'll just use their voice credits to vote other things up. But if you do, that's where back here, that's where this differential comes from. So we've decided that about a 10% differential or greater than 10% differential should be the minimum passing threshold. So if you look down here, this internet game show sponsor, that didn't pass. It just didn't get enough people that wanted to spend the money on it. So going back, next, pixels. So just a small explanation on pixels here, because we will have another whole presentation on this, but that is going to be the ecosystem that incentivizes the movement of color. And we're hoping that an entire ecosystem will pop up around that, having to do with apps and all kinds of different things that keep people engaged. And there's a whole lot of mechanisms that we can talk about there. So, block builder. So again, in any good blockchain, there's always a way that consensus happens. In Bitcoin, it's the miners. In other systems, it might be the people who hold certain amounts of coin. They get proof of stake that way. In ours, it's similar to EOS, if you're familiar, which has a certain amount of people that do the consensus. And in our case, it's 49. And then steering committee. So what is the steering committee? Steering committee is they are elected by the Color Council, and they help provide quality assurance. They do development oversight, and they are the code maintainers of the Color project. So they essentially make code decisions, and as long as everybody's happy with how they're doing it, but that will probably maintain. And then lastly, the arbitration committee, they handle dispute resolution, account bannings, if there's any hacks. If you can provide a proven case to them, they will have a majority ruling on or against your claim. And that's just one of the ways, providing a way for people to get justice cheaply and readily, we believe is one good way for governance. You could put this akin to maybe small claims court in the traditional court system, which I think is very important, and I've had to use myself. So, bottom line, fully inclusive governance, a fair voting mechanism, and a community-driven treasury. With these three things, we believe that we'll have powerful governance that will not only incentivize people to use the system, but also to take part in building it. And that's it. Stay tuned for our videos next week, and yeah, thank you for watching.